All right, welcome to NLP Today in August. A few weeks late because of travel schedules and things like that. But we're going to start back up the NLP Today, probably the first or second Wednesday of the month, unless, who knows, we could. But anyway, let's jump in and talk about this. Memory reconsolidation. There's a lot of research going on about it. Like, we're the group, our little NLP group kind of expands the boundaries of what a lot of people in the hypnosis and the NLP world will do. We brought in the waking hypnosis in a user-friendly, easy way to do, naturally, easily, effortless. I mean, take it, make it simple. Lately, too, I brought back something I never thought I would teach to the general public, which is behavior profiling and detection deception. With a little bit, then I could go into manipulation of the behavior profile. Based on the research from the FBI and the CIA, places that spend a lot of money on how to influence people, how to read people. Did that class, really enjoyed it. And the deception detection was a lot of fun. So that'll be part of the basic now, a little bit of that, the basic and the master. But today we're going to talk about memory, right? And before we even get into memory reconsolidation, which is a current big topic in the therapeutic community, we have to look at how memory actually works, right? And, memory is not what we thought it was. You still see people make the false assumption, memory is like you take a book and you got the book, you put it on the shelf, then when you pull the memory down, you open the book, and there's the memory, you close the book, you put the memory back, right? That's not really the way your memory works. Your memory is very fluid. It keeps changing. Every time you access a memory, you may rewrite the memory. You may alter the memory. There's other things, right? But all this is relatively new. We didn't know. But why does some people's memory work one way or another way? How reliable is memory? I think I'm going to mess the numbers up, so just bear with me. But something like 100 people that were imprisoned for a long period, decades, and that were freed by DNA evidence. There was no way they could have committed the crime. Like 80% were convicted on eyewitness testimony, right? And then all the studies done with false memory, how it's easy to manipulate and create false memories. I mean, probably the only one old enough to remember that, maybe Bruce, in the 80s, the whole false memory syndrome thing that was out there, that, therapists were creating false memories. And it caused a big brouhaha. But I still remember first time I heard about it, I went, this is so cool. Not for the negative things they were doing, but if you could put in a negative memory, what if you put in a positive memory, right? So anyway, it's all much different. And so I went and started looking at, when I get ready to look at this, just memory in general, right? And what changes, it's the thought process of memory. A lot of it goes to, there was a patient they call patient 0, and he had severe epilepsy with seizures. And so I guess this was like decades and decades ago. So they didn't have the kind of detection equipment we have today, imaging, but they figured from what they knew that it was in his hippocampus, the misfiring. So they took out pretty big chunks of his brain, right? They call him patient 0. And what they found is after the surgery, he could not create any new memories. Right? He just couldn't create new memories, okay? I mean, he could remember things from childhood, he could remember things from long ago, but he couldn't, if he met us today and we walked in a few hours later and introduced ourselves, he wouldn't remember who you were, right? And that kind of started a different thing on memory. But then a guy started to really look at it, and kind of goes to the work of a guy named Candell, survivor of the Holocaust, because he studied memory. But what they found was this guy who could not recall memory. Therefore, he shouldn't be able to learn anything new. Well, they gave him a test. I think it was to outline a star, but not like, only looking at a mirror. If that makes sense. So you're looking at the mirror and you're outlining the star, right? You can't see it. Most people can pick this up after like several trials or tests. It's like you'd start tracing it because you learn a new motor skill. It's a motor skill, right? Well, what they found was, contrary to what they predicted, he shouldn't learn this new skill. He learned the new skill. It was slower than a person without the what we call brain damage, when they move part of his brain, but still he learned the new skill, even though he couldn't tell you how he learned the new skill, right? And then they did some other experiments with him, and a couple other people had that kind of issue in their brain, retrograde, I think it's called, is it anterograde amnesia? One you can't remember new memories. But they could learn new motor skills, and they would have a sense of something, right? So they might meet you the second or third time. It's like, I really don't know who you are, but I got a sense of it. If that makes any sense, right? So it's kind of interesting. So memory is not what we think it is, right? And that different kinds of memories are stored in different parts of our brain, right? And again, those of us in the NLP world, hypnosis world, visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, gustatory, those are in different parts of your brain. And so if you get a stimulus through the strongest is sense of smell, it'll activate that part of the brain, and you'll remember where that smell came from. And now we know with imaging, it'll light up the other parts of your brain. It may bring up a picture, it may bring up a feeling, so, oh my God, I'm going to get sick. You smell something bad or whatever. You smell, when I first moved to Florida, it would drive me crazy. I'd go to a restaurant and all I could smell was old lady perfume. That live, don't smell it like you used to, right? But you know what I mean? It was like, and it would set off these triggers in me. I'd think about my mom and all this other stuff, right? Because she died of lung cancer. She couldn't smell anything anyway from chain smoking cigarettes for 50 years. But still, it's those different parts of our brain, right? And Dr. Kendall really delved into it by studying sea slugs. Bear with me on this, because the DNA is like 94 or 5% aligned with human DNA. So yes, I'm saying we're not that far removed from sea slugs, ladies and gentlemen. And all you have to do is go on Facebook and you'll be convinced some of us are still sea slugs. Lighten up. But they developed different memories, and it was actually in the biology. Dr. Kendall, brilliant man, figured out different parts of the brain stored different memories. It kind of goes back to patient zero. Now we're going full bore. And to kind of tie it in, there was a student of his, Dr. Nadar. He studied rats. And again, it was a study that really broke that memory is not static, right? So what he did is he took these rats, right? He would put a tone in the room, and he would shock the rats, right? Okay, fine. It didn't take long, as they'd say, this goes back to B.F. Skinner. It would get encoded in your brain, and then all the rat had to do was hear the tone, and it would freeze because it was expecting a shock. And this lasted through a long period of time, like Pavlov's dog, right? But what he did is he found that if they would block a certain part of the brain, which they use propranolol, which is a beta blocker, but it stops the formation of memories, right? And what they did is they would do the experiment again, the buzz and the shock, and then right afterwards they would give the propranolol and then let them hear the shock. But they didn't. What happened was they didn't experience the fear response. Right? It was like it wasn't encoded, because what happens is, to use that memory analogy, if you pull the book off the shelf, you pull the book off the shelf, you open it up, Well, now, and I've heard different things, from the moment you start thinking about that memory, at that moment for about 1 to 4 hours, that memory is malleable. It can be changed. You can reinforce it, which I see a lot of us do. You think about how bad it was, you'll relive it, you'll make it worse, right? But what if you rewrite it in a more positive way? And again, what happens is with the rats, the memory was there of being shocked, but it didn't encode, because what happens when you learn something, your brain is nothing but a prediction messaging system. It's there to predict what's going to happen to keep you alive. Okay? It's developed through hundreds of thousands of years. Okay? If we were still in a tribal culture, if you saw clouds a certain way, it was storm, da, 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 da. All of this stuff gets encoded. And if you can't predict what's going to happen, your gene pool died out. So you're all here knowing your brain can do this. Right? And so we're going to jump in now and talk about this, about how to make change, tying it in with the NLP world. So if that's how memories are formed, what are we going to do with that? And one last thing on that propanol, it's kind of a derivative of alcohol, if you will. I'm not a chemist, so you can look it up if you're more chemically inclined than me, and not that kind, Bruce. There's some thought that's why people with alcoholism that experience blackouts, that's what happens. Their brain's not encoding the memory of what they did. If we all went to a party and we all had certain experiences, and when you go to sleep that night, your brain will encode those memories. We'll all have slightly different memories, right? But it'll be encoded. But if it's blocked, and maybe alcohol can do that too in mass doses, right? The memory's not there. So, but how can we use this from the NLP and the hypnosis model, if you will? Well, first of all, we have to think about incremental or transformational change, right? What do you want to do with your clients or yourself? Are you going for incremental change or transformational change? They're both effective, but the problem is if if we're going to use this model, an incremental change, it's little at a time, which there's nothing wrong with that. But if it's only a little, it's easier to go backwards. It's when someone has a true transformation, they can't go back to the person they were before. Okay? It's a transformation. You've transformed. You've left. You're no longer a caterpillar. Okay? And the one I always think of is, I'll pull a Tony Robbins here. My dear friend David Goggins talks about, when he decided to lock down and go to SEAL school, he couldn't be the person he used to be. He had to transform himself physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. If you haven't listened to his book, it really gets into that, right? And then once he got started, he wasn't going to go back. That's a transformational change, right? And that's, I think, what we shoot for, right? If you can do this transformational change. But a lot of times it's incremental. You'll make little changes to get to your goal. They're both okay. But when it comes to this, we have to begin to look at, how does this work with memory? We have two types of memory to work with. You have explicit memory, the memories that, you can consciously remember happened to you, right? But then you have the implicit memories, right? And implicit memories are the ones you get a sense of it, but you can't remember the events. It's why those of us that understand memory, and the more I know, the more I realize regression to cause isn't going to work. Right? I mean, it'll get some incremental growth, but it's like your memory is not like taking that book off the shelf. It's different every time, but it's implicit. And types of implicit, explicit memories, you're seeing it through your eyes. You can remember the memory, the pictures, the sounds, the feelings, smells, taste. But the implicit, you just remember the feeling, the felt sense, right? And this happens in one of two ways. One, the event that left that happened during a highly charged emotional event, right? Which shuts down your prefrontal cortex. So you weren't processing it that way. It goes directly into your midbrain and your deeper brain for self-protection. Or it happened before you develop your prefrontal cortex, which is usually about, I don't know, 6 to 10, depending on what kind of developmental psychologist you're looking at, right? It's why, if we could ask, like, you think about what's your real earliest memory? A lot of times your first memories are more of a sense and then the memories that you remember that are explicit are probably when you're, 6, 7, 8 years old. And again, depending how old you are, memories fade, right? So, but again, if it's formed before the prefrontal cortex is dominant, it's going to be more of a felt sense, right? And this is where you get into the argument, not argument, but where that part of you, that memory cannot be impacted by words. It doesn't understand words. It only understands the fear, the anxiety, the lust, whatever the memory brings up. You want to have some, I don't want to say fun with it, but you want to, realize that you can rewrite these memories. And we're going to talk about how to do that now. So again, your brain's nothing but a prediction mechanism, right? So if something happens, there's a stimulus in the outside, or trigger is fired off, and you begin to get a stimulus, and your brain goes into prediction mode. It brings up a feeling, and that feeling might go, the last time I felt this, I got hurt, right? The last time I worked with someone that, they couldn't stay in a relationship because every time they started to feel that attraction, real attraction, it brought up the feeling of being hurt. So this is what self-sabotage is. I will blow this up before you can. I'll quit the job before you fire me. And your boss goes, I was going to fire you. You were doing great. What the hell? But you're like, well, it doesn't have to make sense. Your brain, that part of your brain will not, what do you call it? Will not understand the words. You have to rewrite a somatic memory with a somatic experience. So that's kind of what the thing that we're working on. Excuse me, I'm trying to multitask here, and I'm not good at it. But so we want to rewrite this prediction mechanism. So if you always self-sabotage your business, if you can't learn technology, or you're afraid to try to learn this technology because it brings up the last time and I went up and failed, which may go back to childhood where, you had a helicopter parent who you got a 92. What is wrong with you? You could have got 100, whatever. So we want to do that. And to use our NLP model, to keep this short, we introduced the HOT model. Billy Schilling started to work on it, and we came up with this HOT model, which is that you have different levels of thoughts, right? So when you're in a somatic experience, when you're in an experience, you're in the first level of thought. You're experiencing it. You may not know why, but anxiety is like this. You have the anxiety. Even though, there's money in the bank, there's food in the refrigerator, there's no storm, there's no hurricane sitting off the Gulf. Why do I have anxiety, right? But when you're in the experience, it shuts down, especially the prefrontal cortex. You can't think your way out of it. So that's and so what we have to do is pull people out of that. And so the second level of thought is it pulls you out of it where you're thinking about the experience, right? So you can analyze the experience. You're thinking about the experience. And that's what we do with our NLP and hypnosis techniques is we pull them out of the experience, and this is where all our NLP techniques come in. We do a visual squash, new behavior generator, what do you call it? Ego strengthening technique, anything like that, that changes this thought about it. And then when you go back into the experience, and this is the part people forget, you got to go back into the experience with the new memory. And the strongest for this to happen is a counterexample. Right? So if someone had a fear of technology and writing their own web page, not to pick on anybody, right? You step into that fear, you really feel that fear, you know what it's like, and who knows where the hell it came from, that's irrelevant. If you pull out of it and then think about a counterexample, you could go incremental, but go to the time you surprised the shit out of yourself with technology. Right? It's the old, I didn't know I could do that till I did it. Military training is based on that. Right? Bruce has been through it. You end up doing things you never thought you could do, which changes your subjective experience of it. Right? Tony Robbins' Firewalk, that's what that's about. Right? It changes that. But if you get a strong counter example where you went through it, then what happens, that memory, the book's open and there's a different experience. Right? And you may have to do this a few times, but the experience is different. So when it goes to reform and go back, it's a different memory. Right? It's not like, it's not a false memory. It just removes all the emotional charge, because now you think about technology and it's like, I could do this. It might be some work, it might be some effort, but I can do this. Right? And so that's what makes it fun. So then when your brain is recoding that memory, reconsolidating that memory at night, excuse me, it's going to rewrite it in a different way. Because your brain wants to predict success. Right? But if success for you is avoiding a relationship, avoiding making money, avoiding doing whatever it is, right? You need to change that perception that's the sense level. Because for one moment in time, maybe you needed to avoid a relationship, or you couldn't do this or that. Okay? But now it's become, so your brain wants to update and get a better, it's called prediction error. You know, you want a better prediction error. That sounds therapeutic, but I've been in all these psych damn seminars and they use them fancy psych words. But so yeah, so you know, and you step into the experience with the new somatic, emotional, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual thought process into the experience, and it should rewrite it. Right? Because there are some studies being done where they use that, I never pronounce it right, propranolol. So that there's a good study. If I could find it, I'll post it. It was on National Public something, but they were studying memory, and they had the one where a person had a severe fear of spiders, right? And you just watch the video and you could see the fear. And then they have the guy, it was a guy, stand up and walk into a room, and in a terrarium there was a tarantula, right? There's a tarantula. And of course, if you have a fear of spiders, you ever seen a tarantula? They're big, hairy things, right? And this guy was having that experience, right? And of course, he was terrified. So she had him really in the experience. We can't quite do this, but it was a cool example. So he's like, you could see his breath, you could hear it, you know, he's like, and she has him just go over and put his hand near the terrarium, right? And you could see it, right? But then he pulled back. So there's a safety. Okay. It didn't jump out and kill me, which is maybe what he thought, right? And then he put his hand in a little bit closer, right? And again, then pull his hand back. And obviously it's a pet tarantula. It's just kind of like sitting there. And so now he had a new memory. Then they had him take back, and she had him thinking about the fact that he just experienced a tarantula and he lived. And then this was a drug-based test. Then he drank some propanolol, just a little bit, I don't know, 20 meg or something. And then it did not allow the old memory to form. It formed a new memory. It blocked, blocked the fear response. He could only remember the positive response. Then he was like petting the tarantula. It's fascinating stuff. Well, we do that with the NLP technique. Those of us have seen it. John's familiar with it, with the fast phobia technique that Tony Robbins did decades ago with the snakes. I did at the Guild a couple times with tarantulas. People, come on up if you have fear of spiders. Then we do the technique. Then I bring out the little thing with a tarantula in it. It was awesome, right? And it works. The last time, same thing. But the missing ingredient, and I'll end with this, is then you need to reinforce it with some tasks that will reinforce the new learning. The old analogy of when you fall off a horse, they tell you to get right back on it, but not just once, right? You don't just get back on it once and get off and walk away, because you have to keep, you keep doing it. And so you need to, if you're going to look at this kind of stuff, and I know I'm guilty of that, is not giving the tasks that people need that will help them reinforce the memory, the new memory. I remember to do it a couple clients ago where a person had social anxiety. And I said, just go to Starbucks tonight and say hi to 3 people. Don't try a goddamn conversation. You're not like trying to pick up a woman or whatever it was. Just say hi, how you doing? And that, within a few hours of we did some NLP stuff, then they actually followed through. They went to Starbucks, got a couple coffees, said hi to a few people. And then when I saw them a few days later, they said, I can't remember why I was so afraid of people. I'm still careful. I said, you ought to be. But I mean, it removed that fear response. So, and again, when you think about self-sabotage, that's because your brain is predicting the worst anyway. So you'll self-sabotage so you won't get set up to be hurt. So that's a little bit on the memory thing. And yes, I do have a class coming up on therapeutic memory. What am I calling it? NLP Memory I'd have to go look at the page I did yesterday. See, it didn't get encoded. But I'll be doing that in September. It's going to just be a couple-hour class on a Saturday. So look for information on that. So, but it kind of puts our NLP and hypnosis work, or even classical therapy, in a different mindset.